Disney is the one that got Cinderella right, and I will die on this hill. Hi, I'm Taya of Your Little Sisters Productions. People think they know the Cinderella story. Little girl, evil stepmother, prince throws a ball, godmother makes a dress, prince marries the girl because of her shoe. But have you really watched the movie lately? Disney's cartoon Cinderella came out in 1950 and is one of about 1 million adaptations of this fairy tale. IMDb lists the top 27 versions of this same story in film alone, and it's not even counting the majority of the flopped, gender bent, or unofficial titles that have been produced, not to mention TV series, books, countless plays. Cinderella is one of the most adapted stories in history, crossing dozens of cultures and spanning several countries. And it'd be tough to pick a favorite adaptation because there are so many. And most adaptations are good and have themes and values that we can all get behind, such as faith in yourself and in a brighter tomorrow, hope despite being in an impossible situation, and belief in one's dreams, big or small. And these are just some of the good messages that I found in this story. Also, the cruel bad guys get their comeuppance and good wins, which is a universally endearing and uniting trope. So why do I think the cartoon version Disney put out in 1950 got it right? Because almost everything people criticize about this story can't be said about the Disney cartoon. Almost. Love at first sight. Like Laura stated in an earlier video, love at first sight happens in fairy tales. It's not a concept unique to Cinderella. And if you don't like love at first sight, then you probably just don't like fairy tales, which is valid. You do you. So is there love at first sight in the 1950s Disney Cinderella? In this version of Cinderella, they meet, dance, and spend the entirety of the ball out on the grounds, singing "So This Is Love" to each other out under the moonlight. Now the question is, in a musical, when a couple is singing, are they in a musical montage where a lot is happening and we're just seeing part of it while the music overlays? Or is it a musical expression of what's happening on the inside, like a voiceover of their thoughts while they're not talking, just dancing? Or are they actually, in reality, just singing to each other? In this version of Cinderella, given the jumps in the location during the movie and their lips not moving, I say the last one is out. The music is definitely an overlay. Now, were they talking and getting to know each other, or just staring at each other lovingly all evening? Who knows? But even if they had spoken, shared everything about themselves, leaving out their names and occupations...
I don't even know your name. How will I find you?
Oh, the prince. I haven't met the prince.
The prince?
This is, in its purest form, love at first sight. So that critique stands, and you can let me know in the comments if that's a deal breaker for you. But for the rest of this video, I'd like to focus on 5 main criticisms that this film gets that are entirely untrue and could be avoided if people stopped thinking they know the story and actually watched the movie. First off, when anyone criticizes this story, the main thing they say is he only recognizes her by her shoes. He doesn't look at her face.
So he doesn't even recognize her when he sees her? He's basing this off of foot size? Like, who is this, Tarantino?
And to that I say, I think Clark Kent could attest. People see what they expect to see. And in several versions of the Cinderella story, the trope that clumsy Clark Kent just can't be the amazing Superman is utilized. How can a servant girl be the beauty from the ball? Well, whether you buy it or not, this trope doesn't apply to the Disney cartoon. If you watch the movie, this is one of the only versions where the prince isn't the one who tries the shoe on the girls. He isn't there. In fact, he never sees her face again until the wedding. He never doesn't recognize her face, or even thinks he won't recognize her face. In this version, it wasn't the prince's idea to try shoes on girls. It was his dad using the prince's proclamation of love to manipulate his son into a loveless marriage with anyone who could give him grandchildren.
Sire swears he'll marry none but the girl who fits this slipper.
He said that, did he?
Ha ha! We got him! Highness, I'll have nothing to do with it.
You'll try this on every maid in my kingdom. And if the shoe fits, bring her in.
Unlike Cinderella herself, the prince did dream of love. And when he found it, he vowed not to let anyone sway him, and proclaimed he'd only marry the girl who owned the glass slipper. and a selfish king took advantage. Had the magic not protected the slipper from fitting anyone the Duke saw before Cinderella, I'd like to think the prince wouldn't have gone through with it.
That's his problem.
It would have made zero sense with his character, which we'll talk about later. Luckily for the prince, the Duke knew he found the right girl because she had the other slipper when Lady Tremaine shattered the first one. It was the perfect way to tell the story without relying on the Clark Kent factor, which could have made the prince look stuck up or stupid. Critique 2. Cinderella just sits around and waits for a prince to save her.
Cinderella banned because, you know, she waits around for a rich guy to rescue her. Don't rescue yourself, obviously.
Nope. Sorry, cheetah girls, not in this version. And honestly, I don't know any versions of the story where she waits in a cellar for a man to save her. In this version, she is locked in her tower room to try and stop her from meeting the Duke. But she is freed from her room by her own wits and friends that she saved earlier in the movie. Were it not for her quick thinking and her kindness in general and understanding nature, they wouldn't have helped her out and she might have missed the Duke. Critique 3. Cinderella dreams of her prince coming and saving her. Nope, that was Snow White, and we've already addressed how that makes perfect sense for her. But Cinderella dreams of happiness, and it never says what will make her happy. And when she's invited to the ball that night, she dreams of going to the party like Quasimodo. She wanted one day out there to see the palace and be like a normal girl again, to be free from abuse for one evening. Holding out faith in painful, hopeless situations is hard, and I'm glad I had a role model in Cinderella who kept the dream alive and found joy in the smallest things, like going to a party or having her only friends be animals. She didn't dream of being saved by love, but being loved is a big part of being happy, and her stepfamily didn't love her. Yet she knew if she kept on believing, she'd find her happy ending, no matter if that was a prince with a castle or just a new home with people who loved her as much as her animal friends did. And that's a worthy dream, even by modern day standards. Critique 4. The prince has no personality. First off, this isn't his story. He's a love interest in Cinderella's story. And not going into a love interest's backstory is not only common, but standard for most major film genres. But let's talk about what we do know about the prince's personality. He loves horses, he has romantic ideas about falling in love rather than marriage of convenience, and he's all kinds of sassy with his dad, who isn't fooling anyone by throwing a welcome home ball and only inviting eligible girls and their chaperones. We also know he used to be close with his dad, but as he got older, the king wanted him to marry, and he spent more and more time away from his father. When he finds what he's looking for, he sticks to it, fights for it, and stands up to the king. True, by doing this, the king sets out on a quest to forcibly manipulate him and his ideals. And if the magic hadn't kept the slipper from fitting anyone else, it could have been disastrous.
That's his problem.
But a man who is romantic, loving, and willing to fight for what he believes in? Shoot, I'd marry him. That kind of unicorn is hard to find nowadays. And finally, critique 5. Cinderella is reactionary, not active. If you think Cinderella is passive, then you're not alone. People seem to think the story happens to her rather than her causing the story to happen. And again, if you watch the movie, that's not what happens. If Cinderella had been anyone else and stopped believing in a better future for herself, none of the story would have happened. The fairy godmother literally says she wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Cinderella's faith. Even though Cinderella herself says she's given up hope, the fairy godmother states she wouldn't be there if that were true. Having faith is an action. Being willing to accept help is an action. And not losing yourself in an abusive situation is an action. Defying your abuser and going to the ball despite them is an action. The fairy godmother appeared because of Cinderella. The animals cooperated because of Cinderella. The prince fell in love and made that declaration because of Cinderella. And when Lady Tremaine trapped her to keep her from the Duke, the mice got the key because Cinderella was their friend. And when Lucifer was preventing the mice from succeeding, Cinderella was the one smart enough to think of Bruno. Bruno, the dog, who had been dreaming of chasing Lucifer for years. Bruno chases away Lucifer so the mice can bring her the key. She takes the glass slipper and runs to meet the Duke in front of her abusive stepmother. Not all actions require a sword. And make no mistake, Cinderella in the 1950s cartoon saved herself. She got what she wanted, a better life, and someone to love her. Seems the only criticism of the story that this movie has is the love at first sight thing. And a lot of other adaptations try so hard to avoid this because heaven forbid you fall in love with someone in one night as opposed to, 2 days. I think if people sat down and watched this movie, they'd realize that this is the best way to do an adaptation of Cinderella. Keep the magic and the fairy tale, but lose the Clark Kent versus Superman trope and have fun with it. So yes, there are tons of Cinderella adaptations. And love it or hate it, I do believe that Disney got it right way back in 1950. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know if you agree that the cartoon Cinderella got it right or if you think I'm crazy down in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe and ring that bell so that you never miss any storytelling videos from Your Little Sisters Productions.